Good evening, everyone. Everybody's still awake, right? It's not that late. Fatima, thank you for such a lovely and thoughtful introduction. It's really a pleasure to be here this evening. First, I want to thank BRDIGES, which we're delighted to be members of, the U.S. Attorney's Office, for putting this program together, and in particular for hosting it and inviting me to speak. And I'll talk in a moment how this came about. And certainly I want to thank folks here at the Wayland Mosque for hosting us and providing this beautiful venue. And most importantly, I want to thank you for being here tonight on a late Friday night to engage with us on this discussion, and really to provide the opportunity to air issues of concern and to talk about how we can work as a community to deal with some of the situations that we've been seeing more recently. You know, this is really an opportunity for us to come together for this public community event and to express support for one another in our efforts in these very uncertain times. It's an opportunity to embrace really the importance of living in peace in a diverse and inclusive society. It's also an opportunity to embrace the position that everyone, regardless of their race, their national origin, their disability, their sex, their religion, or other protected class, has equal rights under the Constitution. And it's also an opportunity tonight for us to embrace the premise that discrimination, violence, or harassment that targets people because of what they look like, or what city they come from, or where they worship, will not be tolerated, because this is not what America is all about. You know, as the U.S. Attorney, I think Fatima told you, I'm the Chief Federal Law Enforcement Officer, and I, along with my colleagues at the U.S. Attorney's Office, we view our mission as protecting and keeping the community safe. And we work, of course, with our federal as well as state and local law enforcement partners. And we do that to investigate and prosecute crime, and in all different arenas, and in particularly in outreach and engagement. And I'm thrilled to say, I'm very proud to say, that tonight we have members from the Massachusetts Attorney General's Office, from my office, from the Department of Justice, from the Massachusetts Commission Against Discrimination, and the FBI, our civil rights leader here in the Commonwealth, tonight to talk to you and to really for us to discuss these issues of concern. And so it's our jobs really to keep the community safe. And what that means, it means all the community, not just some members of the community. You know, recently, as everyone is aware and was mentioned earlier, there have been terrible attacks. There have been terrible attacks before, but more recently, the last few months, Paris, Brussels, San Bernardino. People have become, and in particular, the Muslim, Arab, Sikh, and South Asian community, whoever appears, because people can be ignorant, as targets of hate speech. There's been hate speech that's been directed at these groups, or hate crimes, such as Stop Islam or Go Back to Your Country, from discussions that I've had with many of you. And this generates feelings of fear, alienation, and uncertainty. And there's been a lot of discourse about building borders and surveilling neighborhoods and getting people, or getting rid of certain groups from getting them out of the country, or preventing them from coming into the country. And all of this raised really serious concerns. And so a few weeks ago, as I was, and my colleagues around the country, because we are having events like this throughout the country, there has been an uptick in certain crimes, and particularly targeting Muslims and Arabs and Sikhs and South Asians and throughout the country. And I hadn't really noticed an uptick here in Massachusetts, but I didn't want to take that for granted. And I spoke to my partner Hank Shaw, the head of the FBI, now here, and he also hadn't seen an uptick here. But I wanted to reach out, and I reached out and set up a call with Fatima and Tahir and other members, and Hussein, I think, was on that call as well, of the Bridges community, and said, I just want to make sure, are people concerned about what's going on in this country here in our backyard? I want to know what was happening here in Massachusetts. And the voices that I heard and the expressions that I heard made me realize that people were concerned, and they thought that it would be a good idea to have this kind of a conversation and to talk about what are our rights, what should we do in these uncertain times. And in particular, I was very moved during that call when Fatima shared with me her story about how her daughter, who was going to a concert, do I have that right? Was going recently to a concert, and she said, Carmen, and I'm having chills as I tell you the story, she says, Carmen, I was terrified. I was terrified for my daughter because she dresses like I in a garb, and she was going to this concert, and I was afraid. Would someone say something? Would someone hurt her? And I just was petrified until she came home and nothing happened. And I was happy to hear that. And that's the way it should be. But there was real fear. And so it raised our discussion saying we should come together, and here we are. The reality is that, as President Obama has noted and many others in my U.S. Attorney community, we cannot be bystanders to bigotry. We just cannot remain silent in these times. And I looked at local situations, and Greg Dorshak from my office did a little bit of research because I want to make sure what has come. This is what's come to our attention. I'm not saying this is the only thing that's happening here in Massachusetts, but more recently we've had a variety of different situations, such as allegations of racial discrimination in a Boston school, anti-Semitic signs, symbols, and words at a Newton middle school. We've had a hacking into computer systems at UMass Amherst, Northeastern, Smith, Clark University, and several others where the printers, the way that the computers were hacked, the printers then distributed these flyers containing anti-Semitic words and threats. And just I think a couple of months ago or less, there were statues that were vandalized, beheaded, at a Catholic church in Burlington. And also in Burlington, just this past fall, there was a vandalization of a mosque in Burlington where they took red spray paint and painted USA across the outside. You know, terrible acts, really, but really no one was physically hurt, but still the fear that garners that kind of behavior in different groups is serious, and we need to pay attention, and more than pay attention, we need to do something about it. And you know, there have been other crimes throughout the country that are listed in a Department of Justice press release that we have copies for you here at the table. So all of these issues, this kind of behavior and divisiveness and hate that we hear about is not what this country is about. And so that's why it's important for us to really face that and figure out creative and smart and practical ways to deal with these situations. You know, President Obama was recently speaking at the Islamic Society of Baltimore, and there he was addressing the current situation, and he said, you know, we're one American family. And an attack on one faith is an attack on all faiths. Because we're in all this, we're in this together. And so what can we do, really? And how can we move forward when others that are full of hate and full of ignorance, really, try to tear up the community? Well, from my point, I say that we need to stand tall, we need to stand strong, and we need to stand together. And we need to have gatherings like this, where we come together and we feel the strength in community, and we have an opportunity to bond. We recently had an incredible event that Bridges hosted in Lexington. It was a powerful evening where an incredibly diverse community came to see the producers of a movie called Not in Our Town, which really focused on the terrorist attack that occurred in Oak Creek in Wisconsin a couple of years ago, where the Sikh community members were gunned down in a gurdwara as they were worshiping. And this film that focused on Oak Creek and talked about Not in Our Town, it talked about, really fighting hate and having communities, building communities that were diverse and embraced inclusivity, and where everyone could live together in peace. And I think having those kind of events throughout our community are important to really emphasize that message. And I'm delighted to say that we are having another event like that in Billerica on May 18th, and more details will follow. So I'm delighted about that. Secondly, I think it's important that we need to engage in real counter-narrative and messaging. We need to spread this word and have events like this, but we need to really reach those who really don't think already the way we think. We need to reach communities that are suspicious, and that's a little bit more challenging. So we have to work together to figure out how to go into other communities where we can really provide not just engagement but awareness about who Muslims are, who Arabs are, Sikhs, what Islam is all about, so that people aren't ignorant about that piece of it. And I think having the right counter-narrative is critically important, because as Fatima said, those other voices can be really, really loud. And so in many ways we have to engage in our own publicity campaign to really spread the word. And finally, I think that we need to, or in addition to, we need to respond, and us in law enforcement, and you see the full force that's here this evening, respond quickly and accurately when we have reports of hate crimes. And you'll hear in a little bit, there are different agencies that deal with different kinds of hate crimes. But in order for us to respond to them and deal with them, we need to hear about them. And if they're not reported, we can't do anything about that. And we are very, I'm very proud to say that at the U.S. Attorney's Office, we've established a civil rights unit that specifically, among many other types of civil rights violations, will deal with claims of discrimination and bias and religion in different forms and settings, and hate crimes as well. There's also, what's not a crime is hate speech, as damaging as it can be. The beauty of America is that we live in a country that really treasures and respects freedom of speech. And so the key is, how do you balance freedom of speech, even when it's hateful, even when it's offensive, with really your efforts at trying to and helping the community feel safe. Because hate speech doesn't make one feel safe. It makes one feel alienated. It makes one feel that they're not, that they shouldn't be comfortable, and that this isn't their space. And so how do we deal with that? And that's something to really tackle. You counter it with healthy speech, but you have to be in the different venues. My key point is that we need to be responsive. These crimes need to be reported. We need to be responsive, and there's clearly the effort here and the commitment by the Department of Justice, the U.S. Attorney's Office, the FBI, and also our local and state partners as well. Because we need to make clear that the civil rights of all Americans will be protected. And then finally, I think we all should feel a responsibility to reject discrimination, and as I said earlier, not be bystanders to bigotry, not be silent when you hear folks talking in pure ignorance and offensive language, and to state what you know and what your knowledge is. I'll say this, I'll give you a personal experience of mine. A few years ago, I was with a neighbor of mine and with their son, and he was traveling and getting ready to depart. And I think, Fatima, I've told this story before at Bridges because it just kind of boggled my mind, the conversation that I had. And we were in her kitchen, and he was getting ready to depart, and I said, did you have everything ready for the airport? He goes, yeah. And he says, I'm really worried about flying. And I said, well, what's worrying you? He goes, well, if I'm online and I see a Muslim or somebody in one of those outfits, I'm really going to worry. You know, something going to happen on the plane. And I looked at him, and a young man, a teenager, and I said, oh my God, you don't really think like this, do you? Do you really think this? Do you really feel it? And he was serious. And his mom was quiet, which made me worry about what she was thinking about. So probably for the next half hour to an hour, I sat in their kitchen talking to them about my experiences with my engagement at the variety of different Bridges meetings, all of the diverse Muslims that I have met, how you cannot judge folks by what they wear and what religion they're associated with. And so I spoke up. I wanted to educate him, and that's a small little sample, but I'm just saying that we are in different venues and different situations where sometimes we can take the time to explain things and share our own personal experiences, or we can stay silent. And I say you need to speak up. You know, we accomplished that also by being here, because I think by being here and sharing our thoughts and feelings, we empower one another, and we know that we're headed in the right direction. So I really want you to benefit from the rest of the panel. So I'm going to conclude with a quote from President Obama's speech at the Islamic Society of Baltimore, where he stressed, he was looking at, primarily it was the Muslim community, but there were many others in that venue, and he said, you know, you have the power as a community, you have the power to bring about change and not submit to hate and ignorance that strives to divide us. And he said, we are one family. We will rise and fall together. It won't always be easy. There will be times where our worst impulses are given voice. But I believe that ultimately our best voices will win out. And that gives me confidence and faith in the future. After more than 200 years, our blended heritage, the patchwork quilt, which is America, that is not a weakness. That is one of our greatest strengths. It's what makes us a beacon to the world. It's what led that mother who wrote to me, the one who worries about her young daughter. It led her to end her letter with hope despite her fears. She said, I still believe in one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let's not forget that. Thank you.